carbon market has always been dynamic. I think since the past couple of years that we've been here. Yeah, expecting the progressive in terms of the regulations coming up. It was started in 2019, where the three founders actually met in The Hague, Netherlands. We are on delegations with our previous corporations for One Young World Summit, where all of the young leaders are gathered and solve world pressing issue, and one of them is climate change. And we saw that the world cannot wait. The climate is deteriorating, and we need to do something. And it has to be beyond our corporation. So when we go back to Jakarta, Indonesia, we formed this CarbonEthics because we want to speed up the climate action. At that time, a lot of individuals are talking about plastic waste, which is good, but no one in mass level is talking about the carbon. That's very interesting. It's very a handful of people that talking about it. So we planned at that time, 2019, to form CarbonEthics to spread awareness. The first, it's on the individual level, and later on to the company level. And at the end, one of them is doing climate actions by mangrove restorations, because Indonesia is very vulnerable as a archipelagic country. Due to the climate change, 70% of Indonesian people are um, relies heavily on the coastal sea, and when the sea level rise, they will impact a lot with the household of our people. So this is what we see, and when we visit the farmers, I think they're really vulnerable, and especially on COVID times, 90% of their income is gone because people cannot travel. There's no restaurant income. There's no tourism income, and the way that make money is through the restoration work from CarbonEthics, and that's what me felt. Okay, I'm making impact here, not only for climate but also for biodiversity and also for the people. And that's how it started, and now it's just a history. Yeah, Indonesia has 23% of world mangrove area and 17% of blue carbon potential. So it's big. And why it's underutilized? Because yeah, we often talk about a lot about potential of coastal sea, about the blue carbon, but then sometimes it's very hard when it comes to the executions. Um, where mangrove is not only about absorbing carbon that can absorb 4 to 10 times higher than the trees in the terrestrial ecosystem. Has a challenge as well. Like for example, the land tenure. Many of these mangrove ecosystem are fragmented, and especially in the coastal sea, whether this is um, citizen on land or this is the government on land. So I think there's a lot of also we call it the land tenure complexity that we find 6 years back at that time. But now I think it's clearer now. Where whenever we want to do carbon projects, we need to have a specific land tenure license, and that's clear already from the government. But still, again, there's a lot more things to do in order to unlock the full potential of blue carbon. So apart from that, restoring mangrove is a very complex process. And now our survival rate of planting a mangrove is 75 until 98%. So it's good. But most of the time when we do pilot, you know, there is also a challenge in terms of nature. There's one time where our planting is all gone because of all of the floods coming. So I think it's very important to combine science, practicalities, technicalities to put in practice on mangrove ecosystem, because not all ecosystem of mangrove, not all location can be treated the same. So different methodology, and that's how make it complex. That's why not many people are really utilizing it to harness its potential. So that's what we think about. Talking about destroying the mangrove for economic growth, I think our stance is that we're not only should be focusing on restoring mangrove ecosystem, but protecting the existing ones. I think, like for example, in Indonesia, the government already make this national mangrove map, where is the mangrove that's abundant and the medium and also scarcity to be reforested. So I think that's clear enough for people to prioritize on the effort on conservation, rehabilitation, restoration as well. But then, yeah, our stance is it's better to protect and also restore the degraded ones rather than you destroy and you move elsewhere the mangrove. I think because this is what interesting about mangrove. When you plant mangrove, 20 years, they absorb so many carbon. But then when you cut it down, all of the emissions come out. So it's and all of the effort is just wasted, right? So I think this is some perspective that I want to bring up. So please don't cut the trees. And we have a lot of ways to protect the trees while also maintaining economic growth, tourism, sustainable aquaculture that also can be generated by the community. So I think let's find some middle ground on that one. And your next question is around the land ownership, right? So I think I cannot speak on behalf outside region of outside country of Indonesia, but I think what I learned is that yes, there's a government ownership. We have social forestry license or private concession license, which actually they don't own the land, but government give them permit to manage, whether it's for the restorations effort and stuff like that. So 35 to above years. So it's a long term. I think that's one of the clarity of the land tenure is very important because when you have this, license to operate, it speaks a lot, right? Even though when you go to the ground, there's a lot of also, oh, this is my land, this is your land, something like that. So I think it's happening elsewhere also. But at least the clarity of the project, the boundaries of the area is clear enough at the very beginning, and that's when you want to verify the carbon, like for example with international methodology or with national methodology, it's clear enough for providing the baseline and future forecasts for the carbon project. I think before carbon finance, there's a lot of type of financing before, right? Like philanthropic, corporate social responsibility. I think the idea is that how to make the carbon project, especially blue carbon, is have diversified revenue. So, for example, in our project, it's not only about how you protect the trees, you plant the trees, and then we doing the accounting of the carbon, but also how you can create revenue out of the ecosystem itself that can directly be generated by the community. Because when we come to the community, it's very hard to talk directly about climate. What they really pay attention of, it's about economic, right? So for example, like how to make sustainable aquaculture inside mangrove ecosystem, how to harness this mangrove waste into something good. Yeah, we can make shirt, we can make a soap from those waste of mangrove. We can have crab, mud crab inside the mangrove. All of the fish is coming back. So those things that we need to also diversify. So when we have a model, we need to ensure that the project not only have long-term revenue like carbon, but also short-term revenue that can be accessible to the community, right? And that's how the blended finance can come in terms of the maybe equity, maybe grants, yeah, and also a debt for aquaculture. There's also a lot impact debt out there. Also carbon buyers. So what we already did is that we unlocked the philanthropic corporate social responsibility, and it's a big thing because in the previous administrations, Indonesia is um, having this ambition of restoring, a lot of mangrove in Indonesia, and that's also empowers the corporate to do so, even though it's not on the carbon story yet, right? So that helps us in a way to also gather the blended finance. So the first one on scalability is about the model of the project. And the second is that how we can also monitor at scale. Of course, it's different to do project in 2 hectares versus what we do now is 124,000 hectares of blue carbon, for example. It's different in terms of scale. We need technology. We need satellites data. We also have a sampling as well. We still have to do on the ground sampling to check whether what we do for automation is correct. What's error percentage of it? So that's how we maintain the integrity, right? And B, automation at scale, right? So that's how to scale. Um, and also I think how to make sure we have the model for community. So FPIC, free prior informed consent, is a continuous process, engaging the community how they make sure they take the ownership to participate in decision making of whatever we're doing on the ground. I think it's very important because when especially doing nature-based project, we're not only dealing with trees, we're dealing with human. I think that's very important, right? So that's the thing, that to have a model of community work that can be scaled, how participatory mechanism, benefit sharing, etc., and can be scaled to other land as well. One pilot that we did in Sumatra Island. Well, when we first came in, there's no group of mangrove enthusiasts, of course. Nobody is doing that. But then what we do is that how we engage the local administration and make sure all of the people in the multiple districts take part. Because, you know, when you only involve one district not over another, they will have, you know, some envy to each other. So making a group of diverse people, making sure every value chain is kind of contributed somehow. And at the end of the day, now I think it's already 4 or 5 years. They have their own corporation, right? They have their business, waste bank, and then mangrove fashion kind of thing. So they manage their own entity, and somehow they can thrive out of the mangrove ecosystem, because after they plant it, and then what's next, right? If they don't find the economic value out of the mangrove, they will cut it down again. So it's very important to continuously educate and facilitate them how to harness the economic value without destroying the mangrove. And that's how I think the community participatory is very important. Yeah, and that's what we want to scale elsewhere. Um, Especially this year is very different from past couple of years. Of course, I think what we felt is that government is really pushing and really optimist for unlocking the potential of carbon market in Indonesia. Of course, it's not easy because, you know, we need to be careful to, you know, to release some regulations. But what I see is the vibes is different. Now I think the government are more supportive, more listening to us. Of course, we've been also they talk with project developer a lot, right? And from the mutual recognition with international standard up until the revision of certain regulation that allows voluntary carbon market to also open in Indonesia. I think that's one of the effort, giving the signal for the investor outside Indonesia to also come in and contribute for the development. So vibes is positive. However, there's needs a lot of things to be done, of course, but I think we still fight for it. Yeah. Whatever happened, I think we will help also the government to speed up the process. Philanthropic or perhaps CSR is cannot purchase carbon credit. So that's one of the policy in Indonesia, because basically there's no additionality when you spend the CSR money. It has to be from the different pocket of the corporate, whether it's investment, whether it's, you know, purchasing kind of thing, but it cannot be under the same bucket. So what we do is that our project, especially on the community development and also restoration, has been following the CSR philanthropy kind of model for the past 6 years before it's kind of open this year, right? So unlocking those, the blended finance is already been done. However, what we need to do now is how to unlock the carbon finance. And I think that's what you said also to it depends on the speed up of the regulations, because when the regulation is ready, I think the investor also coming in, right? They need certainty on the how to play carbon market in Indonesia. So I think that's also contributing as well to the interest of the investors. They need clarity of the regulation and stable environment of investment. It's very important for us to do baseline assessment first through a lot of assessment, including the free prior informed consent (FPIC), and make sure we have the theory of change in each of the projects, right? And that's how you can, okay, what sort of outcome and etc. So from that, you know what's your project metrics, right? We do have and monitoring and evaluations. So it's either quarterly or annually. So for short-term basis up until the long-term basis. And at the end of the day, we always do this social return of investment. So every US dollar that's come into the project, what sort of social value, how much social value that we can generate. And I think at least on the philanthropic or CSR world, it's very important metrics outside carbon, because it's measure a lot of things like increased income of the community, how much hours training that has been done, right? On top of that, also the woman participation is also important. So as of now, we have plenty of the woman farmers lead, and also 35% of our farmers is women. So I think we keep also pushing that for women to be take part, especially women and also young people, because usually young people are aware more on the digitalizations, because we do digitalization a lot on the site, and it's very grateful to have these young people to intervene as well. Of course, the clarity of the regulation is, I think, everywhere is important, including in Indonesia. Especially we're expecting now for mutual recognition with the FERA, for example, and also revision of the President Decree. I think that's two things that every investor elsewhere in the world is looking at of Indonesia. And when that too is finished, and the confidence level is boost up, right? So that's the first thing. We need to unlock this. Otherwise, there's no carbon finance. Yeah. And the second thing is that what we find it hard is the early stage financing, because usually the mangrove projects and all other blue carbon projects have high capex of the project, especially on doing restorations work. So that's why early stage financing will be the bottleneck, and that's why we do the blended finance. Yeah. So if we have public-private partnership that unlock de-risking this project before it can receive the higher investment, it will be great. It will scale up the project even more, because a lot of projects died in a feasibility study because they cannot finance it. So I think this is very crucial, early stage financing. And the third is about land tenurial. Now it's okay for us, but it's only cover partly of Indonesia's potential. How about those land that's not in a forest area? Because what's unique in Indonesia is that when you're talking about mangrove, there's a area of forest and non-forest area, right? So forest is clear, there's a license, but non-forest, how we can do it, right? So there's a needs of how to apply for land tenure that needs to be clear to unlock full potential. There's a lot of beautiful projects but cannot upgrade to carbon project just because of the land tenure. So I think if we can unlock this, it will be so much benefiting the citizen of Indonesia. Next 3 years, of course, we're now focusing blue carbon and peatland ecosystem, because what we see is that these projects are versatile enough to also go for compliance market, especially Corsia market. I think the government of Indonesia also preparing that on top of the voluntary market, non-CA that we kind of build at the moment. So we're going to be focused, deepening the blue carbon, wetland, peatland ecosystem, and still expanding few projects up until next year, and have it to be get ready for issuance. I think that's the first priority. And in the next 5 years, we see that we can also, contribute to the region, not only in Indonesia. I think there's a lot of potential as well, peatland and blue carbon that, and other nature-based projects that can be also we can take a look at. But for us, it's important to win in just one rather than try to do everything and not win in all. So prioritization is very important in the next couple of years for us.
Thank you very much.